In today's show, we're going to explore the biggest advantage when building a microSaaS using WordPress. And we are also going to have a little coaching at the end on the idea and concept of psychological ownership for the solo founder and solo programmer of a project. And I just want to remind people who might be listening to this as a podcast or even looking at the YouTube, if you want to see the show notes on the slides, come on over to wpplugincollege.com, and I have that there for you. So let's get to it.
If you are motivated to learn to code the 21st century web, from plugin products to microSaaS, welcome to the Plugged Into Programming Show, with your host and professor, Jamie Rowe. Jamie is a computer engineer and solo founder of the wpplugincollege.com. And now, over to you, Professor Jamie. Concepts.
So what is the biggest advantage of building a microSaaS using WordPress? This is a question that I get often from people who are looking at different types of application builders and SaaS software. We're going to go into some depth today try to use some objective criteria to evaluate the main advantage of using WordPress. Before I get started on that, let me just define two words here, okay? For those that don't understand exactly what microSaaS is, you can look at some of our previous material up on wpplugincollege.com. But microSaaS refers to a SaaS, which is software as a service. So this is software that you are usually monetizing through some sort of subscription model, and people are not installing it on their own computer system or their own server. You are running that in a central location. The micro part of the microSaaS is that it's a scaled product, scaled business model, so that a solo founder or a very small team of people can, number one, create it, and number two, operate it as a sustainable business. So that's that one definition. The second definition is, you'll see, we're talking about WordPress here, but sometimes you'll see that I write it as WP, and that's kind of a common thing up on the internet. So if you see that, they're interchangeable. That's the content management system / blogging system / everything framework that is out there right now and is dominant in the internet in terms of websites and now web applications. So anyway, with that said, let's jump right into the topic here. So leveraging WordPress as a development framework, I've already spoken at length in some earlier shows about the advantages. Again, you can go to wpplugincollege.com and find all of that, but let's just summarize some of the three big ones here. Well, WordPress is a robust, flexible, and reliable technology stack. And what that means is that there are languages, database systems, functions, all sorts of cool things built into WordPress that builds WordPress that are at your disposal as the developer of another product, a microSaaS in this case. And then number two, you get the benefit of WordPress and all of its pieces, that it's open source software. So and a bottom line on that is that open source means that if you distribute a piece of open source software, you also have to give away the source code, which is the magic of the logic behind how WordPress or a plugin or whatever works. So we get the benefit of that in using it as a microSaaS framework. And we'll get into some more detail of that in later shows. But number three is that you get a gigantic WordPress ecosystem, which really is thousands of plugins, free ones, paid ones, premium, freemium, whatever, themes, so you can change how it looks, consultants and companies of all different kinds with software and services. And all of this generates a $600 billion ecosystem out there. So it's a huge market, and it's a huge resource really for a developer, because you could potentially utilize some of those pieces of that ecosystem. Again, some might be free and some might be paid, but they are there. So those are kind of some of the big pieces there about why WordPress is such a great framework. But now, if we look at this, what is it that solo founders or programmers really value? And with talking with a lot of people who have done this successfully, and some of my own experiences, ownership and control is something that we value. And especially when we're talking about micro SaaS or sustainable scaled businesses. We don't want to work for other people. We don't want to be under the control of larger organizations. And the WordPress, being an open source system, a community-based development team, and all the other things that come with it, it really lends itself to us having control over what we do with it. When you have commercial software that you buy and it's locked, you can't get into it and see how it's built. You can't make modifications. There are lots of limitations, and we're going to go into more detail here. But that ownership is a big thing that as a solo founder, programmer, developer, those are something that we really value. So I guess the question is, what is the biggest advantage of building a micro SaaS using WordPress? I have to say that the answer is you 100% own and control your technology platform. And we're going to go do a deep dive here into how this is true. And so, as you know, I'm an engineer, so I'm always looking for some sort of objective measures of things when I talk about things, because it's so easy just to say things off the top of your head, and your gut feelings, which I value. But let's look at 4 factors and try to do some objective looks, at these 4 factors. So factor 1 is startup ability. And that has to do with how easy or difficult it is to use something to get started with a startup business. Number 2 would be scalability. Again, we are talking micro SaaS, so we want to keep the scale in a human level. But there's also, you might change your mind. You might want to go huge. So scalability is a big factor. The third one is sustainability. And this really has to do with your values as a founder. If you're trying to do a micro SaaS or some other sustainable business, a model that you're trying to follow, then that's important to you. And then saleability. So again, we're not usually thinking I want to sell my site, my application, my micro SaaS, but that's a factor. So what are we going to do in an end game someday? And let's look at the first one. So startup ability. I maybe paraphrased or coined a new term here, but with 100% control, okay, of your WordPress-based micro SaaS, you can install and run your SaaS system virtually anywhere. And this is really amazing because, I hear a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but there's definitely a bias. There's a bias on a lot of blog posts about PHP, the language that's at the core of WordPress. And, it's one of the oldest development languages for the web. And sometimes people look at that and say, oh, it's terrible. They're behind the curve, which is not true, because we have all sorts of new releases of PHP constantly with the really advanced features and improvements. But the cool thing about using PHP is that it can run on like 90% of the web servers, if not more, that are out there. So you can get shared hosting for literally like $3 a month for a very small thing. You can get servers from a hosting company. You can get virtual private servers, VPS. You can go to cloud services like Amazon or Microsoft, Google, and others that are out there So you have a huge choice, which also means that it has a good control of the cost, which is the second factor here, or point on this startup ability is theoretically, this is using WordPress gives you the theoretical lowest possible startup cost, because really what you need to pay is the hosting. And if you, if you go with something like Bubble.io, I mean, there's a free service. I'm doing air quotes here, even though I'm not on the screen. A free version, it's great because Bubble.io is itself a SaaS product, but then you start getting into 25, $100, $500. You end up can spend hundreds of dollars a month if you build your microSaaS on that platform. Now, I'm not trying to diss something like Bubble.io or any other language or any other framework or system that's out there. You have to evaluate things for yourself and what your own situation is. But there is a definite higher cost to get going and to operate a production SaaS on one of those paid commercial platforms. So let's go to the second factor, the scalability. Now this is a real word here. I actually double checked it on dictionary online, but the scalability. Let's look at this because again, there's several different ways to look at the scaling of a product, and this has to do with how many users or the size of the data set and the traffic, that kind of thing. So with the lower recurring costs, okay, WordPress allows you to keep it scaled down, okay, and still be profitable. Now think about that. If you are running some sort of a SaaS product and you can only charge $5 a month, and the costs, or let's say $1,000 a month, you're going to have to sell enough, have enough users and sell enough each month to cover your costs and then make a profit. If your recurring costs, or say just your hosting and you're scaled, you can scale down to the size of the customer base or audience that you feel comfortable with, and you could still be profitable even though you have a smaller number of users. Maybe you charge more, but you just don't have that sword of Damocles hanging over your head with those higher costs. So you actually have a longer runway as well. Like when you're doing a startup, you're taking off, you're rolling down that runway. Let's say your hosting only cost you $20 a month on some cloud server at the level that you're at, the scale that you're at. Well, you can probably pay that out of pocket for a long time as you build up your audience, build up your customers, etc. Versus if it suddenly was costing you $400 or $500 a month just to pay Bubble.io or some other application builder. And then conversely, WordPress, because of the ability to host this on all different kinds of systems out there, it is easy to scale it up. So let's think about this for a minute. I use Cloudways. Okay, so I have a cloud server and application in there, and I can literally, let's say I have 100 users, I can just go with the very basic account there. But let's say suddenly I get 10,000 users on there. I can go in and with a click of a button, give myself, scale up and up and up these amount of resources that I need to use and consume on that server that has my system installed on it. I don't even have to move it anywhere. So it's pretty amazing what can be done now. But this does give you a lot of flexibility since you are running, usually it's a Linux operating system, and you've got PHP, and you've got MySQL, you've got an Apache or equivalent server on the front end of it. That's a super duper common stack. So again, you can scale down, you can scale up. And let's say you just, have come up with the most incredible idea ever, and suddenly you are just, being inundated with, tens of thousands of users, and you're basically throwing the solo founder thing out the window, you can rest assured that WordPress does have the capability of handling incredibly large projects. And you can just look at WordPress.com, which is the commercial, hosted blogging WordPress platform that's owned and operated by Automatic, who is the founder of WordPress.org is actually owns Automatic. We're talking here, companies in the tens to hundreds of millions of dollar ranges, and they literally have millions of users on WordPress.com. So you have something at the core of your microSaaS, which has a proven track record of being able to operate the smallest thing you can imagine on the web and some of the largest. So sustainability is the next factor, and we want to look at this not from an environmental sustainability, although that's near and dear to my heart personally, but what we're talking about here is business sustainability. And part of that is that you need to reduce the risks, the various risks from whatever platform, languages, etc., that you are building on. And so if we look at something like bubble.io, no matter how fantastic it is, okay, if you build your application and you are in that system and you cannot move it around because you can't install bubble.io on another machine somewhere or on a cloud server or something like that. You have to have your microSaaS, your application running on their system. So what happens if they go out of business? What if they sell themselves to Google and then Google shuts them down? These things happen out there. We don't know what any of these companies, their situation is at any one time. I mean, do you really know how stable these things are? The other thing is that when you're in a system and you have your content, your logic, your users, your everything is in a system, well, they have rules. Let's say your usage rates go over whatever their limits are. What if you have too many users? What if your users are doing things in your software that violate some rules? What if their content violates the rules? There's all different kinds of things you get flagged for. Your flagging could end up, your account could be suspended. Your whole business could be flushed in literally minutes. The other thing is, you're at risk from raising prices. We're in a situation where inflation is rampant right now, and how do you know that these other companies aren't going to start to raise their prices to cover their higher costs for personnel, for facilities, etc. So to have a sustainable thing, you want to mitigate those risks. And one of the things, if you control and own your platform like you do with WordPress, so you can move that. If hosting goes up, you can move it to a different system. You can move it to a different type of system. If the company goes out of business that you're on, you have your backups and you just install them somewhere else and reconfigure and you're up and running. So, this is an important thing to really think about. And now we're going to look at, I coined another word here, saleability. And I think this is important to understand when you have that ownership. Well, you own a tangible property. Okay. If you have your WordPress system with different kinds of plugins, let's say you built your microSaaS all out of using other off-the-shelf plugins and you didn't have to code anything. Well, you still have the configurations and all of the kind of the glue that makes your system work and how it looks and all that sort of thing. But most likely what I'm talking about are things where you are going to have some custom plugin code, okay? So you own that, and as we've talked about on some other shows and on the wpplugin.com site, yes, WordPress is open source, but since we're making a microSaaS and we're not distributing our plugin that powers it, we don't give our source code away in that situation. The open source only matters when you are distributing that an application to others then you have to give your source code away, hence your logic and your business, value there. So in our case, that is our, part of our tangible property that we own. So you also have your domain and your intellectual property, such as your text and your imagery and whole thing that you've created. And when you go, let's say someday you do want to change directions and you want to sell it, um, you can easily back up your system and you can document it, and you can export everything and you can sell it on the open market out there, and it has value. So this is something to think about in the long haul. And the bottom line, I think, if you look at almost all of the commercial uh, builders and rapid application development things out there and everything, you are looking at the situation where you can really look at it. You would be sub-renting to customers on rented land. Okay, so now there are, in businesses, this does happen. There are plenty of people who build multi-million-dollar giant buildings on leased land, in places where the land is extremely expensive, and but for me, I don't want to be on that shifting sand like that. I'd rather have a homestead out there somewhere that I own, and that's my property. That if I want to have 100 users or 1,000 users on my system, they're almost like they're tenants, they're sub renters. They want to rent something from me, some value, some functionality, some space, some whatever it is that my microSaaS does for them. But I want to own the land that it's on. So that's really the one way to look at this whole thing. And again, what is the biggest advantage of building a microSaaS using WordPress? Again, you 100% own and control your technology platform. And that is the message for today. And I hope this give you something to think about as you make decisions that affect your future. And I wish you luck.
Coaching.
We just talked about the biggest advantage to using WordPress when you're building a microSaaS, and we came up with the 100% ownership and control of the technology platform. And in this coaching time here, it made me think about ownership, and it's not just a legal thing or even a technological thing. It's what's called psychological ownership, and it's very important when you're working on software projects. I found that when you're working for a large organization, a big company or government or something, do you own that software that you're working on? No, but you have psychological ownership of it, and then you can apply your actions towards the goals of the whole organization. In this case, where you're a solo founder, you're a solo programmer, and you're creating your own product, you have to have that psychological ownership, obviously, because you are the one making this system, this product for other people. And this is a very empowering feeling. So let's not just think of the technology all the time when we're talking about software development and even products and online businesses. Let's think about your own psychological well-being as you're working on this project, because this is something that you're investing your time, your money, your energy into creating something of value for other people. And it is a great feeling to know that you have built something. Most people don't have the capability of creating software or digital products. And so to them, it can be magical, or maybe they don't even think about where these things come from. But there's always somebody or a group of people behind these things. And you have the chance to add your own individualized perspective, your own experiences, your own goals and values into the product that you're making, if it's a plugin for WordPress that you're going to give to people or sell, or it's a microSaaS or some other type of web application, this is your chance to give back to others. You might be selling this as a commercial product to make a profit, but you're also giving people something of value for their time, their money. And so that feeling of ownership, if you have it and you imbue that into your creation, you're going to get users and customers that are also going to have that feeling. Like, when we use YouTube or we use a microSaaS product or something, you get invested in those tools. And then as a user, you have that feeling of psychological ownership because you're in there using it, and you might enjoy it, and it might do something wonderful for you. So let's build upon these positive feelings that you can have from owning your technology platform and creating this new value for people. And I know you can do this, and I look forward to seeing what you're able to create yourself for others. So remember that feeling of pride and ownership in what you're doing.
To join our conversation and get the show notes, please visit us at the wpplugincollege.com.